Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this morning's conference organized by Malta Employers. On behalf of Malta Employers, I welcome you all to this first conference, which is being held this year, on the subject of the concept of a four-day week. We all know that it's a bit of a contentious subject, and that is why we are here today. Malta Employers has invited a wide spectrum of stakeholders to discuss this topic in order to have an informed and balanced discussion this morning, which is based on the research that has been carried out by Malta Employers for this exact purpose. And that is why we are here today. So obviously you are all encouraged to participate this morning during this conference. We have a packed program of speakers, as well as a panel discussion, which will take place later on during the conference. There will not be a break during this conference, so we will be running one item after the other, and basically we can start immediately by inviting the President of Malta Employers, Mr. Ivan Refalo, to give us his opening remarks.
Thank you, Edward. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see a nice crowd, and hopefully we'll have a very interesting conference. So, I start by saying it is a great pleasure to welcome you to this conference, our first for 2026, the debate of the concept of a four-day week in Malta. We have been hearing and reading about this with views for and against expressed by the different stakeholders in the various media. We, at Malta Employers Association, didn't want to just sit back and listen to the talk. We want to lead. We are here to move past the generalizations and what-ifs and get into the real facts of how this affects our businesses and our people. This morning, Malta Employers is proudly and proactively leading the national debate on working hours, which has intensified both locally and internationally over the past months. So, today, with the intention of ensuring a complete, factual and objective debate, we have invited key stakeholders, being our political leaders, our colleagues in the driving seats of the major trade unions, economists, academics, and the leaders of industry, to present to us a 360-degree view of the argument before us. I thank you for being with us and accepting our invitation to participate with this. Leading up to today's event, we surveyed our members on working time and flexible work arrangements. More importantly, we have formulated a position paper on the four-day week topic in Malta, which our former Director General and now our advisor, Joe Farrugia, will be presenting shortly. Our intention today is to lead an informed debate about working time and flexibility. Our economy competes in a global market and requires dynamism and smart decision-making to continue to prosper. We felt compelled to hold this public debate because we are convinced that going forward, the country cannot afford to base decisions on generalizations, biases, unrealistic expectations, and false assumptions. In the run-up to today's conference, we surveyed our members over the course of January on the subject. Just over 56% of our members told us that they are not in favor of any four-day week, variations which have been muted in the public domain over the past months. 31% of surveyed members said they would favor a four-day week, defined as a condensed 40-hour week with the same pay. A further 10% favor a four-day week of 32 hours with a pro rata reduction in salary. In addition, we were rather surprised to note that the remainder, some 14% of respondents, would also consider a 32-hour, 4-day week with the salary remaining in full. Although this latter group of respondents is in the minority, the percentage cannot be ignored. The opinions expressed by our members point to the fact that in the scenario of dire shortage of workers, employers require strong leadership on this matter of crucial importance. We believe that every employer should be free to offer any conditions of work that suit the organization and its nature of business. Of course, no two businesses are the same. Even if they operate in the same sector, there should be no blanket measures imposed. Competition for workers is already intense enough, and the public sector should not offer flexible working arrangements that are not viable in a competitive commercial environment. Without wanting to preempt this morning's debate, what I feel and believe is certain is the key role of technology and artificial intelligence, which are looking at us straight in the eye. We need to embrace this reality to our advantage because we believe that the smart investment, especially in areas of digitalization and automation, is the key towards breaking new productivity boundaries in the relationship between work and output. With the help of our distinguished lineup of speakers today throughout the course of our proceedings, we shall today consider the different models of the 4-day week. We shall examine the experience of other countries with these models. We shall bear in mind our own realities and limitations, and together we shall seek to navigate between the options open to us. In the public debate, we have seen different interpretations of the 4-day week, whether you see this as a productivity tool, whether it is a family-friendly measure, or just a way for people to make an extra euro on a part-time on that 5th day. Obviously, all views are welcome. We're here to ask the hard questions and learn from one another. Our goal should be that of coming closer to the true meaning of the 4-day week and its implications. Today isn't about finding a quick fix, it's about win-win. We want to protect our competitiveness while keeping our industrial relations as harmonious as they have been over the past years. This is exactly why Malta Employers is taking such a proactive approach. We are not shying away from the call to action and are holding today's discussion to deepen our understanding of what the options are and what are the implications of our actions or our inactions. It is our intention to yet again ask pertinent questions and to learn from each other's perspectives. As always, we believe that by bringing together different stakeholders and hearing different views, we can harness our collective experience and knowledge to turn challenges into opportunities. I invite you to approach our discussion today with openness and resolve. Together, we can formulate a common vision of a competitive and resilient future for Malta within the realities and opportunities that influence our way forward. I close with an appeal to continue working together to shape a future that promotes Malta's standing as a leader in excellence. I wish you all an inspiring and fruitful conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Refalo. And now I would like to invite Mr. Joseph Farrugia to present his presentation about the subject.
Good morning to you all. It is encouraging to see that there is such a strong representation from various social partners to discuss today what is a very challenging topic. It's challenging basically because although we're talking about working hours, but really it touches on all aspects of our lives. So it touches upon the family, it touches upon leisure, it touches upon competitiveness, leisure, and so on. So it is a multifaceted topic, which I am sure will merit further discussion even beyond the conference that we have today. However, the objective of this talk of this presentation is that I will guide you through a position paper that Malta Employers has prepared, which, of course, will serve as a basis for further interaction amongst the social partners. And I think, as happened in the past, the discussion will be a mature discussion, and then everyone will look into the national interest at the end of the day, because that's what we are concerned with, in a way that will maximize citizens' well-being, which will maximize the country's competitiveness and overall well-being in the country. So there are various arguments have been raised over the past few months and years, not just in Malta, because I think we should start from here. This is not just a national issue. It has been raised locally, but there have been discussions and debates about the existence of the 40-hour week and how it can be reformed or changed. But in many other countries, and as we shall see, there are many examples of actions that have been taken, often to reflect that economy's particular economic and social circumstances. So, first of all, increased concern about the balance between economic activity and well-being. So, yes, we have been hearing a lot about the importance of well-being, okay, and the questioning, so to speak, also of economic metrics such as GDP per capita. Is it an indicator of quality of life? Should there be a trade-off between production and leisure if it leads to a better overall quality of life for its citizens? So definitely this is one of the points that is constantly being raised. Should economic activity and the growth in economic activity be the prime mover of a society? And should societal success depend on purely on economic metrics? And as you know, recently there have been a lot of discussions about quality of life indicators, both abroad and even in Malta. The way that society has changed over the past few decades also raises the matter of the number of hours that are worked, particularly due to the fact that today we have many dual-income families, that is, both the husband and the wife go out to work, and therefore the pressures on family life that this brings. So there are certainly the positives. Imagine today if in Malta, if we did not have a high participation rate of women in the labor force, okay? Beyond that, there is also the aspect that women also deserve to have fruitful careers as well. Okay, so there are many positives to the dual-income family, more money in the family, but there are, of course, the downsides as well. And those of you who are involved in human resources management are very well aware of the pressures that some employees face due to family pressures of having two full-time jobs within the family. The 40-hour week needs to be revisited because it has been enshrined in labor market practices for more than a century now. And therefore, one may ask, is it about time that it is revisited? Is the 40-hour week still in sync with current economic and social realities? So, some argue that a reduction in working hours could be seen to be a sign of social progress and desirable in itself. So we need to bear in mind that even the concept of a 40-hour week did not come from, it's not a divine recommendation, but it's something which was decided upon by men and by the social partners through initially the ILO itself. The idea of revising working hours is also discussed within the context of rapid technological change. And especially now, we're talking about new revolutions, the introduction of AI, how will it change the labor market, how it will change the way of life that we have, and so on. But bear in mind, these are challenges that we've had in the past as well, both nationally and internationally. The Industrial Revolution changed society. Technology always, and the aim of technology is to change life in some way or other, hopefully to make it better. And this input of technology has indeed resulted in more output per employee. But now it seems that the argument is, but should we go for more output per employee, or should we reduce the employee's input, retain the same output, and maybe have a better quality of life? So fundamentally, this is the technological argument, because technology has always improved productivity. So for the 40 hours worked, the output today is much higher than the output of the 40-hour week used to be 60 years ago. But this is reflected in the way we live. This is reflected in the way we have access to information. This is reflected in the way we have smarter cars, better houses, or better appliances, and so on. So we've always thought the frame of mind was always that work, add technology, and through technology improve the quality of life. Another aspect is the increased demand for flexible work arrangements, particularly following the COVID experience. So in a way, the COVID experience was an eye-opener for companies. There was already a trend whereby atypical working arrangements were enforced, either through individual requests by employees or else through a restructuring of the work organization. But certainly today there is a stronger element of flexibility in many work arrangements. In fact, even today it's common that even during interviews, either the applicant or the company lays down the type of working arrangements or trying to customize work arrangements according to the exigencies of particular employees through teleworking, reduced hours, etc. Some argue that a 4-day week, yes, it will result in, it won't result in loss of productivity because the employees will be more motivated, and therefore more productive. The 180 rule that you could have employees who could work less hours but still render the same output. Another argument, and I'm taking these as salient points, there may be others, is that the fact that leisure hours will in itself increase consumer spending and result in an expansion economic activity in various sectors. So these arguments in themselves provide indications of the complexity of this issue, and that we cannot simply look at it simply from one particular angle. And indeed, even when we when we discuss the 4-day week, one has to be careful about exactly what is being talked about, what is being proposed. Okay? And, well, a week, is it a week of 32 hours spread over 4 days with pay remaining comparable to a 40-hour week, the 100 argument? Okay? Is it a week of 32 hours spread over 4 days with pro rata pay and benefits, that is reducing the working week, but being paid, the package will be adjusted accordingly on a pro rata basis, or else the 40-hour 4-day week, whereby the hours are compressed into 4 days. Before we go into the implications of this interpretation of the 4-day week, it is worth listing some characteristics of the Maltese labour market. Why? Because circumstances differ across different countries, and we need to be conscious of what are the salient points of our labour market. Okay? This is not comprehensive because this could merit a conference in itself, the characteristics of the Maltese labour market, okay, but it's just a list so that we have a general idea. So yes, the reality is that we have low unemployment, that is all our labour resources are practically taken up, okay, and as I said earlier, it's very important that before we used to say we have an untapped segment of the labour force because only 30% of women who can work are in the labour force, but this is today higher than the EU average. Okay? Therefore, the unemployment that we have is mostly frictional. That is, people between jobs, leaving a job and trying to seek another. Demand for labour outpaces supply, and therefore this is linked to the changing demographic structure of our country. We know that demand for labour is growing, but the supply of labour, the local at least supply of labour, is static or even shrinking. Because of this, a high rate of labour importation. That is, most of our labour requirements are being imported to the extent that today, and this is particular to Malta and a few other countries, bear in mind a third of the labour force is non-Maltese, and this percentage is higher in the private sector because the public sector does not employ that much foreign labour. But today it is common to have companies in the private sector claiming that 60% of their employees are not Maltese. And this factor, as we shall see, could also have a bearing on the argument of whether we should revise the working hours. Increasing wage disparities. This is also something which we observe. Okay? Therefore, the shortage, especially of skilled labour at technical level, even at professional level, has resulted in wage inflation, but not wage inflation across the board. So we have inflation in technical grades and in professional grades, but not so much in lower grades. A rapidly aging labour force. Okay, a rapidly aging labor force is something which we need to come to grips with, because it has various implications, even on working hours. Okay, even on working hours. So today you have an emerging and increasing segment of employees who are over 55, over 60, and one of the challenges that we have is that we have such a labor shortage. We need to encourage active aging. So we need to find ways and means whereby people who are the older part of the labor force are retained, if possible, in the labor force. I think personally it is tragic that we have so many people still opting to retire at the age of 61. Okay, now of course it's a free choice, but nonetheless it is a drain on the national human resource at a time where, in order to reach our economic objectives, we are importing so much foreign labor. 36% of births in Malta are to foreign-born mothers. So besides the fact that we have a very low birth rate, okay, we are also coming to terms with the fact that even we have the lowest birth rate in Europe, but 36% of those births are to foreign-born mothers. And this, of course, again, points towards a demographic crisis. That's what it is. Malta is not the only country that is passing through this. Maybe it is more exacerbated here. Other countries, Japan, and even outside Europe, like Japan, are passing through a similar experience, but certainly this is something which needs to be addressed. But of course, it cannot be addressed through a changing working hours alone. It is such a complex issue that one cannot find a single measure, a single solution to address the situation. But nonetheless, it is certainly part of the issue. The private sector is competing with the public sector for Maltese employees. This is, again, something which before you used to say the private sector is a draw to Maltese labor, it offers better conditions, and the drain from the private sector towards the public sector was not much of an issue. It is now. It is now. It is due to numerous factors. At times, political decisions, whereby you have people being literally poached from the private sectors to join the public sector, even underemployed, okay, which is tragic because it's a waste of human resources. Conditions in the public sector in general have improved to the extent that the private sector, especially in certain, in particular economic sectors, cannot compete with the public sector, and the shortage of labor in itself. So really, the private sector is in competition with the public sector. Many sectors complain of skills mismatches. So besides the shortage of labor, there are also skills mismatches, which means that we are not managing the national human resource to optimize or to match it with the needs, the changing needs of industry. Work organization is becoming more flexible. So already we find today that the strict rules that those my age remember, strict 8 to 5, rigid working hours. Today, these have changed. These have changed, especially after COVID. So today we have various types of work organization through teleworking, through reduced hours, and so on. Many employees, however, are engaged in low value-added, labor-intensive economic activity. So this is one of the weaknesses of our economy, which I think Kirsten will elaborate in the next presentation. Okay, so the fact that even the labor which is imported, a lot of it is engaged in low value-added activities. Low value-added and also labor-intensive, which makes it more difficult to have a flexible work organization. I think we talk a lot today about teleworking, which is good, which is fine. However, we have to bear in mind that a lot of jobs are not teleworkable at all. So this is the reality. Okay, so we have numerous jobs which cannot be done through teleworking. And relatively low labor productivity, again, which Kirsten will elaborate further. These are the fertility rates in Europe. The red bar should be Malta at the bottom. And we see there that Malta's birth rate is, fertility rate is 1.01 and declining. Okay, and declining, it is the lowest. Not only that, but as I said earlier, the percentage of foreign mothers is relatively high. Earlier I said it is 36%. But note, in many other countries it is very, very low. That is, the births are to the national mothers and not to foreign mothers. Luxembourg, of course, has most of its labor force which are not citizens of Luxembourg. They commute to Luxembourg, which contributes to that high percentage. Okay, but in any case, Malta's rate is much higher than the EU average of around 20%, which is a point of societal concern. Okay. Also, the number of weekly work, the average number of hours worked in European countries varies significantly. The average is 36%. In Malta, it's a bit higher. It's 37.5%. The lowest is the Netherlands. The Netherlands work an average of 32%. Okay. Again, Kirsten will elaborate further on this. There is a variation also between the average number of hours worked either full-time or part-time, and even by when it is subdivided by gender. For example, in Malta, when it comes to part-time, females work longer hours than males. Okay, that is one characteristic of our market, which is not found in most other countries. Okay, but again, the average, however, of full-time employment in Malta, the males work more than females in general. Okay, so there is a slight disparity, which, however, is found in many other European countries as well. Interesting, because it will tie in with the recommendations, is the gender pay gap in the EU. Malta has a lower than average EU gender pay gap. Okay, it is 10.5. The EU average is 12.7. Okay, note that countries, even Nordic countries, okay, have a higher gender pay gap than we do. International trends. So it's good to see what the experience of other countries is or has been, the developments that are occurring abroad as well, to see what is happening. As I said earlier, well, the ILO, the 40-hour week, not the 40-hour week, the 8-hour day was enshrined in the ILO Convention number 1 way back in 1919. So this has been there for more than a century, and it is one of the first ILO convention, which established the 8-hour day. but not the 40-hour week. The 40-hour week was introduced in a recommendation in the 1960s, I believe. Okay, so besides the 8-hour day, they also a recommendation, not a convention, a recommendation towards a 40-hour week. In Iceland, the law still is based on the 40-hour week. However, through various collective bargaining, the working week in many companies in Iceland is less than 40 hours. And this is in part to a reaction to the fact that in the past, the average working week in Iceland was higher than that of many European countries. Okay, now the working week, the average working hours in Iceland are, I believe, close to 36, still higher than many other Nordic countries. In Belgium, in December 2024, they legislated, it is the, I believe, the only country that has legislated for the 4-day week. Okay, they legislated for the 4-day, 40-hour week, so the compressed week. However, the experience of Belgium so far is that employees have rejected it. That is, they prefer to continue on a 40 hours spread over a 5-day week, claiming that the compressing the hours into 4 days can be a source of burnout. And apparently less than 1% of employees so far have opted to work the compressed week. France do have the 35-hour week, but it allows for longer working hours in contracts of employment. And in fact, the average number of hours, the average weekly number of hours worked in France is higher than 35. Germany, there is a pressure to increase working hours, either through a reduction in public holidays or through encouraging people to work more. And even recently, the Chancellor of Germany, Merz, has made a statement, okay, that we cannot be competitive and sustain the welfare system and our standard of living by working less hours. So the movement is for people to work more. The Netherlands is an interesting example because although the legislation still stipulates the 40-hour week, but the actual average number of hours in the Netherlands is the lowest in Europe. Okay, so on average, people in the Netherlands work 32 hours. But then, even if we compare Netherlands, for example, to Germany, which is an industrial powerhouse, okay, the average or the GDP per capita in the Netherlands is much higher than that of Germany. Okay, so there are reasons. And also note that the Netherlands has a relatively high gender pay gap. A relatively high gender pay gap because women tend to work fewer hours. Portugal, in the past, in the late 90s, had reduced the working hour week from 44 to 40 hours. Okay, you'll find these in the position papers and the position as a background. Okay, but the results were not very encouraging at the time. In fact, the result was a fall in output and a fall in productivity. Lithuania also have measures. Poland, yes. Poland recently, rather than reduce the working hours, they focused on the family And they reduce, similar to what has been done in Malta. The last budget, what was introduced, they reduced the tax burden on families with children. Okay, the average increase, not the maximum, sorry, the maximum increase in take-home pay is around 230 euros a month. Okay, the complaint is that in changing the tax rates, and the upper middle and upper classes have benefited more than the lower classes. So those on minimum income, for example, hardly gained anything. Okay, Lithuania, I will check, I will confirm, because yes, in Lithuania, parents with children less than 3 years work 32 hours without loss in pay in the public sector. So this is a measure that was introduced in the public sector, and today parents of children with children less than 3 years, okay, are entitled to a working week of 32 hours. So here we find a revision in hours of pay, in hours of work related to the fertility issues, okay, linked to fertility. Japan also introduced incentives to children, to families with young children. So this has happened as well. And there is a link to a study by the OECD, Shrinking Smartly and Sustainable, Shrinking Smartly and Sustainable, which is looking at different ways in which countries can deal with shrinking populations. Okay? So, from what I've said, one can look at the change in working hours, or the 4-day week, whatever, from the perspective of its impact on productivity, okay, and also its effectiveness as a family-friendly measure or a tool for a better work-life balance. And I think these should be discussed separately. So if one looks at the 4-day week as a productivity tool, I believe that if there is really a case within an enterprise to have a shorter working hour week with the same or increased productivity, many companies would have done it already, because it would be more profitable. It would be stupid to know that you can employ your people for less hours, get higher output, make more profits, and the result, and you say no, because we are meant to work 40 hours because of the original sin, and you are meant to be to suffer in this life, and therefore we have to keep working for 40 hours. I don't think businesses think in that way. I am sure that most businesses are concerned with their survival, with growth, and therefore, if they know that a reduced hour week will increase their productivity and competitiveness, they would certainly do it, and they would have done it ages ago. So it is not that simple, okay? The compressed working week is already commonly applied in Malta through the roster systems. So we cannot say outrightly that no one works a reduced hour week or no one works a compressed working week in Malta. There are thousands of employees who, in reality, are already working on a compressed system. And also, there are examples of companies that already have a working week which is less than 40 hours, and we find them in different sectors. After all, there is nothing which would keep me, for example, if I'm opening a company, from saying, listen, I'm adopting a 35-hour week model. The pro rata argument would not even come into it, because it's the working week of the organization. So It's not even, one cannot even say whether it is pro rata or not, because it's the working week is 35 hours, and this is the pay structure for 35 hours. Some companies do it, and they do it to attract the best talent in the labor force. Okay, but of course one cannot generalize, or one cannot assume that what applies to one company can apply to another, and this is where flexibility is important. The advantages are improvements in efficiency, lower operational costs, and even less pressure on the infrastructure. But as has been experienced in other countries as well, the compressed week could lead to burnout situation. So the 4-day week as a work-life balance or a family-friendly measure. And I think it's important to distinguish between the two, okay, between work-life balance and family-friendly measures, because unfortunately, frequently, they are being used interchangeably, okay, interchangeably. Work-life balance applies to having a balance between working life in general, okay, irrespective of whether you have young children, irrespective of your age, irrespective of the stage of the family life cycle. So it is indiscriminate, okay? Whereas family-friendly measures are particularly targeted to address the needs of families, particularly in certain stages of the family life cycle. And from the examples that I quoted earlier in other countries, many governments are trying to address the the hours of work from a family-friendly measure perspective, and not through a work-life balance. And I think this is an important distinction. Okay, it will certainly relieve pressures faced by dual-income families. Okay, one questions whether there is a link between the family pressures and the low fertility rate. Probably yes. Okay, probably yes. Current practices enforce in Malta flexible working hours, reduced working week, teleworking, seeking assistance from other family members to try to reduce this pressure, and of course childcare or child-minding services, right? Some families decide to reduce the hours worked, sacrificing disposable income for better well-being. So this is something which is very common today, that you have one of the employee, mostly the female employee, okay, in practice this is what happens, who would ask for a reduced working week at pro rata pay. And we have thousands of women today, and men as well, who willingly adopt this model as being better for the family. They would say even if there is a reduction of income, part of it is saved through tax, so it will not be necessarily a 25% reduction, especially those at higher incomes, so we prefer to work fewer hours. Pilot studies, I think, will be covered in the next presentation. Okay, somewhat, but it's mentioned in the report because I'm running out of time. So I'm going to mention a few recommendations here, all right? So yes, the widespread adoption, generalizing, okay, will be very risky for many companies in Malta. One cannot have a one-size-fits-all measure that encompasses all economic sectors and all jobs, okay, and all jobs. One could have an argument whether in some jobs working fewer hours will retain the same level of productivity. But in high contact jobs, and also in low value added jobs, certainly the link between fewer hours and productivity will be there. There will be a fall in productivity, in other words, okay? A reduction in the supply of labor hours will undermine the competitiveness of many companies, especially if the 32-hour week is adopted. Reducing the working week and banking on a 25% productivity gain is highly improbable, especially in sectors with time-dependent output. Okay? Therefore, a blanket measure that is enforced on the economy places at risk jobs and competitiveness and may well be counterproductive. However, this doesn't mean there should be a status quo, and this is why we are here today. So what we're saying is, first of all, first recommendation, address family-friendly measures, not work-life balance. I am on record of having spoken frequently against the concept of work-life balance because it separates work from life. They also say, and they always say, if you're working, you're living as well. So you cannot have work on one side and life on the other. The two go together. Work is part of our life. We don't live to work, but work is an important, an integral part of our life. We should look carefully at the Netherlands model. Because in the Netherlands, as I explained earlier, the working week is still 40 hours. So how come employees work 32? It is by choice. It is by negotiating with the employer, even on an individual basis. And also the fact that since they have a high GDP per capita, that is productivity is very high, many employees can afford to say, well, rather than working more, rather than working 40, for me, for my lifestyle, it's better if I put in 35 hours. And this explains the reason why in the Netherlands you have fewer hours worked than in many other countries. And in economic theory, there is the concept of the backward bending supply curve for labor, which means that although one expects a positive relationship between wages and labor supply, that is meaning that the higher the wages, the more labor is supplied. If wages are very low, some people may say, well, forget about working, or I will work less, okay? I will not supply my labor. But in theory, there could be a point beyond which employees may prefer to trade additional income, additional marginal income for leisure. Therefore, there is this substitution effect between income and leisure. And that the implication is that if the country is pushed towards higher value-added activities, if we address the productivity situation and there is higher productivity overall, employees themselves may find themselves in a position where they would prefer to trade marginal income in favor of more leisure hours. Now, are we in that situation in Malta? Okay, probably not. Note, the hourly labor costs in the Netherlands are 45 euros per hour. In Malta, it is 20 euros per hour. GDP per capita in the Netherlands is 63,000 euros. In Malta, it is 20,000 euros per person. So there is this gap. And I picked the Netherlands on purpose because it seems as if it is an outlier with respect to the average number of hours worked. But no, the working week is still 40. It is through, mostly through employee choice that it is reduced. But it is also a question of lifestyle as well. So some people would go for more income, okay? Others would treasure the additional leisure hours. And I think a question which needs to be asked here is to what extent will a reduction in the working week be converted into part-time employment? Because there will also always be the option that if you have more free time, you can convert that free time into a part-time employment. Now, we cannot be judgmental and say it is not right that if you have more free time, you translate it into part-time employment, because it depends on family circumstances. It depends also on the level of income. So low-income families would probably utilize free time into, will translate that free time into additional hours, which would defeat the whole purpose. Another thing which you should consider in Malta is the rising number of third country nationals, in employment and foreign workers. Many of these are not here for more leisure time. What they care about is to earn as much money in Malta to be able to send that money abroad for their families. So many of them see Malta as a temporary stay. I've heard Filipinos who say that if they work 4 years in Malta, they can afford to buy their own house in the Philippines. So they make a sacrifice, they come here, and for them, leisure is not a priority. It can be a priority for Maltese families, but not to third country nationals. So probably those hours will be converted into employment, which again, as I said, would defeat the purpose. Economic transformation, this is very important. Shifting to higher value economic added activities that are less capital intensive. This ties in, of course, with Vision 2050, what direction we want to take. Should we continue as we are doing now on the path of labor-intensive services and activities, or should we move to less labor-intensive but with more higher value-added activities? The investment in digitization, AI, and automation, which is prevalent in the private sector, certainly. Why? Because companies have to compete. If you have your competitors, introducing constantly better technological improvements, enhancements, and methods, then local companies cannot possibly compete with the foreign competition. But also, digitization, AI, is frequently a labor-saving device. So we still have areas where we can substitute, labor with automation, with technology, etc. But also here we need to address, and I think we're not doing this sufficiently, the fact that many of the jobs, or some of the jobs that are being done today, will be completely transformed with AI. Will be completely transformed with AI. And this is something which you need to bear in mind and prepare ourselves for. Reskilling of the labor force to match the previous points. As a social measure and as a family-friendly measure, one can consider having parents with second child who would have the right to request a 32-hour week, but the lost earnings may be subsidized by government. So they will work 32 hours. At the same time, they will have pro rata pay, but the government will subsidize part of those 32 hours, for example, through a monthly lump sum. In that way, they can have more time to take care of their children, especially in the early years, by the time they enter primary school, for example, and they will work 32 hours, but the amount will be subsidized by government, not necessarily the full amount. because I think there should be a contribution from everyone, from the employer, from the family itself, and from the government as well. And this might be one of the puzzle pieces that addresses the low fertility. Is it a solution? No, it is not a complete solution, but it could be one of the puzzle pieces, okay? Extension of school hours, okay? Extension of school hours. A lot of the pressure on families today is, I know Mark won't like this, okay, but it's the reality, okay, that they have to leave work to pick up the children, okay? Now, schools are not babysitting institutions, that is true, okay? But with an extension of, and before we used to have longer school hours. When I used to teach, we used to work till 4, okay? But not lessons till 4. In the school where I worked, 3 times a week, lessons used to stop at 2:30 and have extracurricular activities between 2:30 and 4. Extension of childcare facilities to cater for people working shift work and night work, and so on. Inculcating a flexible work culture. This is happening, but it can be reinforced. And as I said earlier, many companies today appreciate the importance of allowing a form of flexibility in their work organization. Of course, this makes human resources management more difficult. And HRM is becoming more complex and more challenging, definitely. But this is what we have to face, okay? Steering away from legislation. We cannot expect legislation to address this issue. It is far too complex, it is far too not even sectoral, but enterprise-centric to really allow for a legislative measure that could possibly meet or cater for the needs of employees, of competitiveness, of productivity, etc. And in fact, as we saw, hardly any countries have legislated in favor of shorter hour weeks. Okay, the changes which I mentioned before, reducing working hours without legislating, can also be part of active aging. And here we can have a balance, that in a way they can affect the productivity coming from the younger families, but compensated through the higher participation of the elderly labor force. And shorter hours, and I think many of you employers and HR managers know from experience that there are many employees who would be or are inclined to continue working beyond 61, even beyond 65, okay, but not on a 40-hour week. So therefore, giving them a shorter working week retains them in the labor force, okay, and retains them in the labor force, and the companies can benefit from their experience, okay, and the contribution that they make, even in training the younger labor force. Therefore, an age mix is important, okay. Finally, encouraging lifestyle changes. Part of the pressures that we have in Malta, I'm sure, is the fact that most of us go to work, or most of the employees raising children, they go to work, they get back home from work, and immediately they have to go out again every day, taking their children to do this, that, and the other, which is very, very stressful. And in fact, many employees will tell you, okay, that I feel less stressed at work than I am at home. And this goes on even during the weekend, during holidays, and so on. And this is something, this is a particular aspect of our lifestyle, which I don't think is there to the same extent in other countries. Okay. Final note, and here I address the political parties. No surprises, please. We are approaching an election We know that the parties are preparing their political manifestos for the election. Please, if you have measures that are going to affect employers in any way, consult. Do not commit to putting something in the electoral manifesto, okay? And once you are committed then, okay, you say, but now it's in the manifesto and you have to do it. At least consult with the affected parties. And the employers are there to contribute, and to contribute positively, as we are doing today. Okay, so we wouldn't like to have measures simply sprout up in the electoral manifesto. I think the experience of the mandatory membership is one of them. Okay, we got to know from the electoral manifesto that the party has committed itself to introducing mandatory union membership. If there was a discussion before, I'm certain that the outcome would have been different. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Farrugia, for a very detailed presentation. Thank you. Now I would like to welcome on stage Ms. Kirsten Kutajer-Miller, who will be presenting us with an economic evaluation of the impact of changes in working time on productivity.
It seems to be going very much faster than me. Okay. So good morning, and thank you for this invitation to be with you here today, distinguished guests, colleagues and friends now. I'm going to skip, thanks to Joe, much of my introduction. I know that Anton is also very conscious of the time, so I'm going to rush to it now, going to go straight to the point. But before I start, I'd like to make two disclaimers. The first one continues very much on what Joe was saying, which is there are other optics to productivity. I am well aware that GDP, euros, and the money side of things is not the only thing which we should be looking at. So conscious of that, bearing in mind that there are environmental, there are sustainable development issues, there are well-being issues which need to be addressed aside from this lens. The second disclaimer is that I have a bias towards the 32-hour week because yes, and I think this bias lies in a bit in every one of us, we want to work less for the same pay. You know? So keep that bias in mind now that we'll get to some slides later on. Okay, starting it off with productivity. Productivity, what do we mean by productivity for the non-economics oriented people here? We are looking at output per worker and better still, the output per hour worked. So I will use the words output and productivity interchangeably. Starting it off, okay. So starting it off with the EU, so what are we looking at here? This is the real labor productivity per hour. So how much, what was the growth rate, what was the growth trajectory of real productivity per hour worked? And Eurostat set 2015 as the 100 base year, which is the 100 over here. So you can see that the EU has sustained a rather upward slope, yes, but it's a very slow upward. If I had to look at Malta's, we would see that our story is more faster paced than the EU, so what we have managed to achieve in terms of per hour productivity has sustained a greater growth rate. It's not that we have a better productivity, but our growth rate, and I will emphasize this, has been faster because we were obviously, even though our starting point was lower than the EU. So this shows that we are able to sustain fast pace of growth. We can, and we have been able to do that in the past. So from 2015, which was the base year of 100, our growth rate increased, our index increased to 112, whereas the EU average was 105, so a greater growth rate. If we had to go to the actual comparative to the EU, so how does our productivity fare in terms of the EU? Okay. What are we looking at here? Here we are looking at the GDP per person, so our output per person employed, not per capita, but per person employed in the labor market. At purchasing power standards, so we have stripped off any price movement which might influence the statistics. And we are comparing Malta's output per person employed from 2008 onwards against the EU average. And the EU 27 average is set at 100 throughout, so that you can see Malta's fluctuating pattern of output per person employed. In 2017, Malta hit a very high position. It was very close to the 100 at 99.4. So in 2017, we have managed to close the productivity gap nearly. And yet, from 2017 onwards, this is what we intend by Malta has a relatively low productivity. This is what we mean. Our gap has been somewhat growing, and it seems as though forecasts show that it's a decline. Those are 2005, 6, and 7 over there. So this is what we are faced with today. Joe mentioned a couple of these, but I will be using this and referring to this as well later on. If we had to incorporate everything which even organizational psychologists, economists, and management people perhaps mention in terms of what impacts productivity on a daily basis at our places of work, we would find more or less these elements. So we have our mental and physical health, which ties with fatigue, technology, which has a huge impetus has a huge impact on productivity, psychological and motivational factors, because we are humans after all, motivation is key, skills, training, and education, very, very important, how the management and organization itself, so internal process, internal structures, but also the way management operates and how it affects all the other parameters, work processes, capital investment tying with technology, and institutional and external factors surrounding us, the external environment. So that is productivity. Let's go into working hours. Working hours in 2008. So if we go back a bit in time, so this is 2008. Yes. And we had 39.1 hours worked on average in a week. We were at 39.1. Moving on across time, Malta managed to decrease the number of hours worked on average by everyone. So not our legislative framework, but how much in total everyone in their particular main job, being it part-time and full-time, the main occupation, what was the average weekly hours? And this has reduced from 39.1 to 37.4 in 2024. This pattern of reducing working hours has been witnessed all across the EU, but still Malta carries higher working hours than counterparts and our main competition, perhaps. So this is the comparative for 2024. 37.4 hours for Malta, Cyprus slightly more, Italy 36, EU average 35.8. And why am I saying this? The growth rate in productivity was, we have seen, was around 12%. The decline in hours was around 4%. So we can see that even though there was a growth in productivity like many other countries, and as history has shown, those have not been reflected in shorter working hours. So far, beyond the 1950s, the gains in productivity have been translated to capital mostly and profits, and also increases in our salaries as well, so, but not working hours. So using this 37.4 average which we mentioned and reflecting it onto sectors, how do the sectors work? Do they all work the same hours? No. Different sectors work different weekly averages. So let me remove 2008 so that you can see also 2024, what we're looking at today. Education is on the far end of the spectrum, 31.9 hours, because of the dynamics of the work. That's how the work is structured. So as Joe was saying, there are already areas in our economy working less than the 40. And agriculture and fisheries is on the high side of 46.3. The service economy, the knowledge-based economy, operates up there under education. We have service activities, professional, scientific and technical activities, ICT, public admin, real estate services, financial and institution services. The bottom part, so we have sectors like manufacturing, human health, accommodation, construction, transportation. Those carry more hours than the average. And this should already trigger some understanding as to which sectors are more predisposed or where is it easier to reduce hours and where it's harder. So if we had to combine the two together, we'll have something like this. What are you looking at here? So you have a sectoral approach, once again, for Malta in 2023. The average hours worked per week are at the bottom, and on the other side you have the productivity which is generated per hour by each sector. The red line is the average hours worked, which was 37.4, and the horizontal red line is the average for Malta in terms of productivity. So we have these four quadrants, and perhaps for the discussion today, the better placed quadrant is the left top quadrant, where we have information and communication, once again, professional services, very close to the bar, other services, and financial and insurance. Those are the sectors which in 2023 have worked less than average hours, but carried more productivity. So they could be more inclined to generating productivity, higher output at lower amounts of hours. On the other side of the spectrum, I have construction with higher hours but lower productivity, and transportation and storage. Statistics could be a bit influencing us over there. We have 40 hours at high productivity. But what this means is that if we move to a 32-hour week, we have to literally move everyone to this red line. And that is quite a feat. So what we have understood from the past two slides is that one size does not fit all. sectors and occupations have different dynamics which determine the type and extent of the relationship between productivity and hours worked. So what is the next step? So I'm using the 100-80-100 model of 4-day week, where wages are retained at full pay, we have 80% of the time, and 100% hopefully of the productivity, which for Malta wouldn't be a 20% reduction in time, but a 14.4, realistically speaking. And what would happen if workers are faced with this opportunity? Surely workers, and I would wake up in the morning and try my best to make it happen. If my employer offers me a 32-hour week at the same pay, I'll be motivated to make sure that I can deliver what I used to do in 5 days in 4 and make my best to produce the same amount so that my dream becomes reality. So for sure there will be a motivational factors, and on the 3rd day of my weekend I will be well rested and perhaps less fatigued. But is this sufficient to retain the 100% productivity which we are saying which we are going to retain? Probably not. Research shows that this only amounts to 20% of the input we need to sustain output. We need a bigger change. So in order for this dream to be a reality, we need to change. And the change is innovation. So we need to reform the way we work, the way we do our meetings, our focus time. Most of you are probably more experienced than myself in managing organizations. So it needs to be more efficient, more effective. But we need to leverage technology and innovation and re-engineer our businesses to obtain productivity gains in technology, work processes, capital investment, management and organization, and probably because we would have invested in new technology, new operational methods, we would need also to invest in skills and training. So all the factors which influence productivity would have been targeted. So a key point is that business re-engineering is required to avoid work intensification, where we mean we're doing 40 hours worth of work in 32 and then we're going to be burnt out by the end of it. Or we're going to get more people to step up for the 8 hours which are missing. So greater labor requirements, or worse still, a loss of output. So my concluding questions, instead of my findings, I'm going to leave you with questions. Are we willing to move away from labor-intensive sectors so that we can go to the left quadrant, which we had seen earlier? Are we willing to redesign our work? Are we willing to put the horse and then the cart, not the cart before the horse? And if we do make productivity gains, where will these be channeled over the next few years? Will we put them towards closing the gap, which we had seen earlier, the red gap from the EU average? Will we channel the productivity gaps towards the twin transitions, climate change, aging population, or towards a reduction in working hours? Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten, for your presentation. I would like to welcome back on stage Mr. Farrugia. And this is the part where we turn to you and we'll be taking questions about these two presentations. This is for you. So questions from the floor, please. No one's working up the courage. Do we have a mic?
Charlotte Camilleri, Malta Employers. For Kirsten, when you quoted the number of hours that are worked, not just in Malta, but across the EU, were they the actual number of hours worked, or was also leave entitlements, such as annual leave, sick leave, were they factored in or not, or were they extracted? And another thing, emphasis is being put on the gender divide.
Yep.
The fact that males seem to opt for more manual work, whilst females, because they are furthering their education, they have more professional jobs. Would this in any way impact the statistics that are being gathered? Would it make a difference? Would it alter the statistics for numerical purposes?
Right, so in terms of your first question, thank you, Charlotte. The data which I was using refers to actual hours worked, but it pulls in everyone, so including part-timers, with a main occupation being their part-time. That is why it is below the 40 hours. So those are, they factor actual hours worked. For your second question, it is interesting. When I was doing research for today, gender came up a bit, and I think it was also mentioned in the previous presentation. Probably from the trials, females have benefited the most from the 4-day week, or from a 32-hour working week, because any preconceptions of working less or a female having to leave the place of work earlier than the male counterpart comes to play. So those gender dynamics come into play, but I'm sure that there are other experts after me who can tackle the more questions on gender.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Hi, this is a question for Joe. You mentioned that pay for women is generally lower because they work on reduced hours, and I think it was in connection with the Netherlands study, I'm not quite sure. I am under the impression that when there's comparisons of salaries and hours worked, an hourly rate is taken. So maybe you can clarify that a bit for me.
Could be, yes. It could be that the comparison is based on the hourly rate. Okay, but still in Malta, the hourly rate is lower, can be lower, hence why there is a gender pay gap. Because also because the glass ceiling. Okay, so but it's changing. So before we didn't used to find women in top, very senior positions, but the situation now is changing fast in many sectors of the economy. Okay, so the gender pay gap will be reduced. Okay, but nonetheless, if you see that countries like the Netherlands have, and Nordic countries have a wider gender pay gap than we do, I do not think it's because of discrimination, because they are far more advanced in women's rights than many other economies, actually, worldwide. And so it's not because of discrimination, and I don't think it's also because of the glass ceiling, because for ages they've had systems whereby women are treated fairly and can also reach top positions within their respective organizations. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions?
Hello. Hello, good morning. Would like to ask regarding the compilation of data regarding the number of hours worked. From my experience from a few years ago when I used to do the returns for the NSO myself, we used to link the number of hours to our payroll. And our payroll used to be the number of hours we pay. And we had many people, then, today, and it will continue tomorrow, that are paid a fixed salary for all the hours they work. And it's growing, the section of people who are not being paid for, I wouldn't say overtime, for those extra hours that they work. This is not being reflected, especially when you said the knowledge base, the financial, the insurance, people in senior positions. So isn't that like a flaw in the numbers? It's not a criticism to your work, Kirsten. I'm just saying that the data is skewed, isn't it? Thank you.
I wouldn't be able to know whether what source of data has been used, but Eurostat data is what I have stored. So I'm not sure that there will be a link between what the papers which you typically fill in and how this data has been collected. So there are different ways in which the Eurostat collects its data parameters. Yes, yes.
Okay.
Exactly, it's comparative to it's the same in different countries. So we're still comparing like with like.
We can take another question. All right. So thank you very much for your time. Now we'll move on to the next segment of the conference this morning, and I'd like to welcome Kevin Borch, who will be leading the panel discussion with the participation of quite the rich panel, actually. So first I'd like to invite on stage Professor Anna Borch, a lecturer and researcher at the Center for Labour Studies at the University of Malta. Her work focuses on work-life and work-family dynamics and gendered organizations. Through her research and teaching, she advocates for fairer workplaces and evidence-based work-family policies that respond to the needs of today's workers while supporting effective, high-performance organizations. Philip Seifert joined Seifert Systems in 2018. Today, he is General Manager of the organization. Philip is a graduate in Management and Economics from the Eisenberg School of Management at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. His areas of focus have included Seifert's broad sustainability and ESG initiatives, the expansion of the local manufacturing operation to its current 450 headcount, and the establishing and expansion of the Seifert global manufacturing footprint in Austria and the United States. Ruben De Bono is the CEO of Maypole Group as of October 2025, with overall responsibility for leadership, performance, and strategic direction of the entire business. A certified public accountant and fellow chartered certified accountant, Ruben built a strong career in professional services, serving as manager of the Business Risk Service section at Grant Thornton, Malta, following 4 years as a senior associate working as an external auditor. Adrian Attard, General Manager, Hyatt Regency Malta, with extensive local and international experience across upscale and luxury hotels operations. He has operated in complex hotel environments with a strong focus on operational performance, service quality, and organizational capability. Adrian contributes a hotel operator perspective to policy discussions on labor markets. Josef Bugeja, Secretary General, General Workers Union, started his career in trade unionism in 1987 as a workers' representative. In 2014, he was elected Deputy Secretary General and then became Secretary General in 2015. Currently, Josef represents the General Workers Union in various national and international institutions like the MCSD, the International Labour Organization, European Trade Union Confederation, and the International Trade Union Confederation. Josef Vella, Secretary General of the UHM, was elected Secretary General of the UHM in 2011. Previously, he held the post of Secretary of the Public Entities Section. As Secretary General, he led UHM in the promotion of Jobs Plus, a policy taken eventually on board and by all social partners and political parties. Today, it is the National Labour Policy. And finally, but definitely not least, Lucien Pache-Ross, territory senior partner PwC, joined PwC Malta in 1997 after graduating in accountancy from the University of Malta. She's a certified public accountant and a member of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants and the Malta Institute of Accountants, where she currently serves as vice president. Her experience spans the audit of local and foreign-owned companies across multiple industries and sectors. Lucian was elected territory senior partner of the firm on the 1st of October 2025. Now I leave you in the very good hands of Kevin.
Thank you, Edward, and thank you to all the panel for being with us today. We promised an objective discussion, we promised an objective conference, and I think you'll agree with me that we've assembled a very strong seven-a-side team to give you objectivity today. I'll start straight off with Lucian, if you don't mind. We called you up last, but we're going to start our first question with you. Lucian, you come from the private sector today, but I think you're in a neutral position, also in touch with your clients. Perhaps you can give us your first thoughts on what you heard today from the position paper of the Malta employers and also the economic analysis.
Yes. So when we talk about the 4-day week, obviously I do see the attractiveness, you know, so for an employee, we do so trying to motivate employees and provide, you know, more, you know, measures that help, you know, help employees with their work-life balance, family-friendly measures. And we have an HC team at the moment that we have quite a big HC team, for example, at our organization that tries, you know, to come up with options and see what flexible arrangements we can offer, etc. But then when I hear a lot of the things that I heard this morning, I must say that there are concerns in trying to marry the concept with where we stand at the moment, okay? So I'm talking now about the realities of the country at the moment and the sector. I heard many times this morning, you know, that this one size does not fit all. And most probably what I'm talking about more reflects maybe the realities of my sector. But the realities, the background, are that at the moment we are struggling with finding the resources that we need. So when I hear something like that, the first thought is, you know, we're already struggling. We're not finding the resources, so capacity. And this is not just the profession, you know, so the auditing and accounting firms, but also talking to our clients. We're struggling to find the resources that we need. So how will we manage to find more time, more resources? Because it's not only the cost, it's not only impacting costs. Yesterday, coincidentally, I approved the HC budget of the organization. And the payroll costs keep on increasing significantly. And it's not just payroll costs, sorry, you know, so trying to offer better salaries to attract employees. We're competing not only in Malta with our competitors, but against other jurisdictions. But for example, because we do, you know, get a number of expats, you know, the relocation cost, so the recruitment cost. But it's finding those people. We do not manage, and this is what our clients tell us, to find the amount of people that we need. You know, so I'm also looking, besides the cost side, the practical side. One other concern that I have is if we are saying that this should help our employees, and as I said, I'm all for that, my concern as well is that by reducing, because maybe of the realities of where we stand at the moment, by reducing the capacity now, we're just going to put more pressure on our current employees. At the moment, again, maybe talking about the financial services, you know, and the accountancy sector, there is a lot of pressure for our current employees to manage, you know, to manage workload. I mean, the nature of our work, and this is why the difference between sectors is so important, the nature of our work is that we are organized by, so there are different teams working on different engagements, different projects, which are, the deadlines are driven by our clients, by regulations, etc. So if there is a project, if there is a deadline, you can't just simply pick, so if Lucian is not at the office or working, you can't just pick someone else to replace Lucian, because Lucian is the one working on ABC Limited. So what we find is that our teams are already under pressure, and by reducing the capacity of those teams, my concern is that they will be put even under more pressure. We do have, and maybe I was thinking about this as I was hearing this morning, we do actually offer reduced hours in particular weeks in summer, where the workload is lighter. And even with that, and it's very limited, okay, what we offer during, during August mainly, where the work, even with that, we have challenges because there are teams that have deadlines and feel it's not fair. So we struggle even with that, because what people are telling us, I'm already stretched, and my employees are not here. So I think it's looking at the realities maybe of the different, of the different sectors. I think that is the key message which struck me quite a lot this morning.
Perhaps even from what you're saying and from what we heard, maybe the next step would now be for us to study, or for someone to study, zooming into the sectors now, the implications on different sectors and what can work and what cannot work in different other sectors. So with that in mind, I will now address Ruben. Ruben, supermarkets require 7-day operations, and food manufacturing obviously needs continuous production cycles. In practical terms, however, what would a 4-day week actually mean for your business? Would it impose the need for more workers?
Good morning, and thank you for having me. So, in terms of Maypole, we operate as bakers, which is a 24/7 operations. So, to cover that stretch of time, you have basically 3 shifts. Then we have the food manufacturing, then we have the retail stores, which are a 7-day operations. My first question, and as it was explained in the previous presentations, there is still a bit of ambiguity what we mean by a 4-day week. Now, as an employer, we try, or I believe all employers try to allocate a fair workload to all employees on that 40-hour shift or day. My question is, if we try to squeeze more productivity in less time, I don't think it will play well on the well-being of the employee. Alternatively, if we reduce the production on a 4-day week, but still paying the same salaries, that is an additional cost of 20% in simple terms. That's extrapolated on longer shifts. Our particular problem is that my main source of revenue is bread. And bread as a staple food, it's a very sensitive subject. Our product is offered to children for school lunches, up to the most senior citizen in the country. And we don't want, and we cannot afford to put that cost on that product. So there needs to, from our perspective, there needs to be more study, more understanding of what we really mean by a 4-day week. As my colleagues and the presentation explained, I don't think a one-size-fits-all scenario, and I don't think that this can be tackled from a legislative point of view, especially in the context when we are looking at a 24/7 economy, and on the facts that there are difficulties to source employees for the production, for the day-to-day production. So that it will definitely increase our cost for sure if it's not studied well, this approach.
Thank you. I'll move on to Philip, next door. Philip, how would a mandated 4-day week impact your production schedules and international competitiveness? Would it require significant investment in automation and BPR for you to be able to continue to integrate into the supply chains internationally?
Yeah, thank you for having me, first of all, as well. Good morning. I mean, I share a lot of the same problems that Ruben has just outlined. We're a manufacturing company on the island. A lot of our constraints are more around machinery in terms of regulating output, rather than just being able to add more people to a production process. That being said, personnel is always an issue in terms of sourcing. If I had a bus of 40 people ready to go outside, I would take them each with a kiss on the hand, and I'd still not have a majority of my problems solved. So starting to talk about now reduced hours and the reduced availability of personnel, is a huge issue for anyone within the manufacturing industry. We have to keep in mind here to look beyond our shores as well. We're not just existing within a Maltese context here. We need to look within the European and global context. In Germany, we finally seem to have gotten the message that the continued erosion of productivity has to be reversed, otherwise we will not be able to compete going forwards. God knows what's happening in the US, and if you look to the Far East, it's a question whether we're going to be able to compete over there again in these sectors. I think we're lucky at this point in time that we have a bit of an injection of this vitality through the defense build-up again, but we don't just live in isolation here in Malta. Eventually, investment as a question will absolutely come. It simply has to come. But I know we as an organization will not be the only ones faced with that question and then with the potential answer of, well, should I be investing that money in Malta given this trend, or should I be looking overseas in my various other locations? You mentioned it during the introduction. Since the pandemic, as an organization, we opened 2 additional manufacturing sites, and we're not talking Far East or Northern Africa or anything like that, but Austria and the United States, the very low-cost countries of Austria and the United States. So at that point, do I put my resources where the line of argumentation and the direction is a different one, and where I might hope for a different outcome? I think Carlo Gavazzi, for example, answered that question last year, and we all saw how that went. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm calling everyone by first name this morning, but as usual, the trade unions are going to create an issue for us employers. So, Josef Bojeja, the German Workers' Union proposed a study, Josef, on the 4-day week. I believe that your position centers around the 100-80-100 concept. But how would you respond to concerns that the rule cannot be applied across the board, especially in those jobs and sectors where the physical presence of a worker is fundamental?
Thank you for the opportunity, Kevin, and Malta Employers Association and everyone. We started studying this about 3 years ago, and during that year we proposed, during the budget proposals, for a compressed working week on a 4-day. Mostly we intended to introduce it or propose it at government, public administration, because in the private sector there are various models, either working on Saturday, Sunday, so the working hours are mixed. It was introduced, there was a huge debate about it, there were people arguing, families, that they are going to extend their time, and other people who were in favor of it. The experience showed that the intake, because of the long hours, was moderate. We continued studying about the 4-day week, and we set flexible working arrangements. During this budget proposal, as you know, we proposed this a 32-hour week. And in the studies, most of the studies that we checked and research we did, it's in what you proposed this morning, what you suggested this morning. And also, we said about this study, because we know that certain sectors will need additional human resources or to re-engineer everything. So we were talking about the healthcare system, that definitely will need national security, hospitality. We started discussing these and how is the impact. And we've seen various countries who were studying this or doing pilot project, and in most cases they were suggesting a study of what is the impact. And that's why we came up with a study of what would happen, and not just about how it will operate, for example, supermarket or hotels or factory, but also the logistical part, because we don't live in isolation. We live part of a global system. So what will happen in financial services if in Malta they are working 32 hours and in other countries they are working 40? What will happen? And that's why we suggested the study of 32 hours and not a 4-day, because it could be spread over 5 days. I used to work a 40-hour week spread over 6, and it was normal. And even the legislative part was catering for that pattern. So what we suggested was, let's do do a study, do a pilot project, private sector, public sector, and public administration, so we know the whole effects. So we know exactly what's happening and why this is happening, and what are the effects of this on various economic sectors. Not just on the well-being of the employees, but also on productivity, on competitiveness. So we can actually debate, and this is something that we hammered a lot before the budget. Let's debate it, let's discuss it. Not just, I'm in favor, why? Because I'm in favor. Or I'm against because I'm against. And taking in consideration not just the local market, but the whole global thing. Because logistics are far more important. And when we are working on this, there were a lot of suggestions coming out. It could be, someone said, okay, so we'll start working Monday to Thursday. No, it could be Thursday to Tuesday to Friday. And you cover the whole shift systems. I remember when supermarkets weren't opening or used not to open on Sunday. Now they open on Sunday. Now I have seen supermarkets who are open 24 hours a day. So the whole economic model of every working organization is changing. But we also need to take in consideration what's happening abroad. And most importantly for us, we are facing, and we have discussed this a lot of time, Kevin, that we are facing a lot of employees who are either stressed, anxious, or suffering from mental well-being, of doing more with less. Automation and AI will help. So this is not just reducing the hours of work, but redesigning the world of work.
This is critical, I believe, Joseph, because I'm sure, as I think Kirsten said, that we're all for trying things out with the best of intentions, and I understand the point of view of employees here, but I think that in the long run we have to be careful, because a 4-day week then, with the stress, with the pressure of work, which will not go away, but will be condensed on shorter hours, I think will have a psychological effect that we may be underestimating.
Just a small note, in one company we introduced the concept of 10 hours a day for 4 days. The problem was, afterwards, that the employer and the employees agreed that on the 5th day, they are called for overtime. So there was no gain in quality time, and and it was agreed by everyone, even our members. So yes, it's a whole thing, but I don't want and I don't like the idea of just focusing on reducing the working hours. We need to focus, I believe, on redesigning the world of work.
Yes. Josef Vella, can you give us exactly the position of the UHM on this subject, and how does your proposal make sure that there is a neutral effect on productivity or positive?
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you for your invitation. Basically, UHM has been proposing a 35-hour week. The idea, because this 35-hour week is not exactly the most popular, not even amongst our members, but the idea was based on what can we do as Malta in the near future. So basically, from an economical aspect, the 32 hours for us, it seems a bit more far-fetched, even more difficult to sustain across the board. We are also saying that, first of all, everybody speaks about the 4-day week, because even if you read papers, it's always this title, 4-day week. Really and truly, we are not after a 4-day week. We are after in finding the formula, the equation for each and every place of work. What we cannot afford is to have every place of work decide whether to stay and remain on the 40-hour week forever, because that it will bring a disturbance even for the employers themselves, because employees will start looking for opportunities where there is reduced week. So basically, what we are saying is this: first of all, let us agree also as social partners on the way forward in terms. What are we talking about in terms of number of hours per week? Then we have an opportunity. Yesterday, social partners started the discussion about productivity within the National Productivity Board. And this, for us, it is a productivity issue. This is a work time reform that has to be done with productivity as the main objective. In there, we need to have a study on a national level, but then again, with helping the places of work in conducting what we call micropilot studies. Because eventually, this has all to be fed in towards this board, if it is the National Productivity Board. It has to be fed in to see the different alternatives that we can provide. Because I cannot imagine saying or coming up with a law with one size fits all. So basically, we have to see the nature of the place of work, not even the sector, the place of work, and what changes needs to be done. But as people were saying before my intervention, this is all about trying to bring a new formula to the 21st century. We've been on the 40-hour weeks for ages, for decades. Today, we have even more technological advancement. We have the input of AIs, and all this has to help us redesign the processes at the place of work. We have to see how we can introduce basically more efficient systems, but we also have to revisit the waste at every place of work. Every place of work has its waste. So decreasing the waste at the place of work, increasing more efficient systems and procedures will definitely help us arrive in achieving this aim. I still see the way we're tackling, I think this is the first opportunity to discuss the subject in a frank, open manner, discussing the views. Unfortunately, I hope that we will not end up with what happened with second pillar pensions, for example. Second pillar pensions, we've seen saying for ages, we need occupational pensions, the first pillar is not sustainable, etc., etc. Now, we are in 2026, and what do we have? Government is saying, look, we are going to introduce occupational pension. We have some private employers who are doing it, and the rest, they don't have any targets. There is no regulation to say by which year we should have these occupational pensions. So that is going to disturb the market as well, because we already are seeing people trying to see within the package of conditions who has the second pillar, the occupational pension. We cannot keep on dealing with all the issues in this manner, like who can do it is free to do it, who cannot do it, okay, fine, don't do it. That is in itself a threat to the market, to the labor market. So basically, it's important that we will have discussions, but we will have time frames that over a number of years, yes, all the labor market has to reach a point, whether it's 35 or whatever, that will be left to the discussion.
Yes, but then again, every employer will bear the benefits and the costs of their actions or non-actions. So in the the same example that you gave of the
I agree with you, but
pensions.
it's not a question of bearing the cost on employer level.
But when government is offering the pensions now to its employees and not all the private sector is not, there is the risk, and it is happening perhaps too much, that employees are, and it's not just because of this, but obviously various other factors, but this is contributing definitely to employees leaving the private sector to the public sector. So
that is my point, Kevin.
So there is a price to pay if obviously you lag behind and drag your feet in certain, and the 4-day week will remain the same, is the same. Anna, I'll turn to you. You also conducted extensive studies on flexibility and the 4-day week. What differences came out basically from what you heard this morning to what you found in your studies?
Thank you very much, and it's, thank you for the invitation. Very happy to be with you here this morning. I was pleasantly surprised, I would say, Kevin, in that there is a lot of convergence. A lot of convergence from the studies that I conducted, but I'm hearing a lot of convergence from the unions, from employers, that this is an issue that needs discussion. Okay, I mean, we are conscious of the time squeeze. I think we all live the reality every day. We spend most of our time at work, and I think on our deathbed, no one cries for not having worked more, We often kind of feel the squeeze, and especially families, and in the Maltese context where Malta has not the low, but the lowest low fertility rate. And from my research, parents especially are feeling the conflict to the tune of 70% of the females, 60% of males. So we know for sure that people are feeling the time squeeze. So I'm very happy that today the Malta employers did not shut down the idea, but is discussing it. I think that's the way forward. It's very refreshing. Obviously, the 4-day week is best understood as one of varied options of a broader ecosystem that we need to discuss for spatial and temporal flexibility and working options. This is just one, but let's discuss it. I find as well a lot of convergence when we say, let's avoid a one-size-fits-all. Yes, we cannot. Organizations are very context-specific, and blanket provisions are likely to fail when we ignore the realities of, are we talking about a bakery working, 7 days a week and sometimes 24 hours a day? So we have to take care of the operational realities related to the sector, the context, and even within organization, I would say, there are departments where different work is being produced. So you might want as well to experiment according to the different needs of the department. So I would say, yes, that approach is good. Flexibility is good. I think where we're converging as well, and especially the unions, let's pilot first. We cannot have something that is imposed overnight without a discussion. I think that would be madness, and I don't think anybody has made that, so I think as well there's a lot of cautiousness, a lot of wisdom, and that's positive. But we can, and government should be a catalyst. Government can provide incentives, the technical support, the evaluation capacity. That costs money. So if government can provide incentives for the pilot studies, I think that would be really good. We also need the social dialogue, things like this help. And I think we need to treat this as an experimentation pathway and work on it, learn from every experiment we do. And I think we can start gradually. We don't need to go, all the way. Can we start, or in some organization, instead of going from 40 to 32, can we start making small adjustments? Like going 38 first and see what happens to 36, 35. So experimentation, I would say, is key. Where I have some nuances, divergences with the study, I understood Joe's concern about the low fertility rate in Malta and addressing that through parents. My concern is that it will create an us and them mentality. You know, it will raise a lot of unfairness issues. You know, why are you giving them the opportunity for reduced hours and not me? And from all the studies that I conducted, when you give something which is meant for the family, usually it's the mothers who take it. Anything that cuts on the number of hours, especially if you cut the wage. And that, unfortunately, will increase the motherhood penalty. You know, and it will increase the caring gaps between women and men, because that would mean women will go home and take on a bigger load of unpaid work. So we have to be careful. And I think it should be open to everyone. A lot of people have complex lives. Even if they're single, they may have their parents, they have pets, like today. Some may be working and studying. So I think if we open up work-life issues, we should open them up to everyone. Parents with young children in Malta, we need to look at this holistically. There are so many things that are missing, like if we just focus on this will not solve the problem. We need other things, the school hour alignment, better paid family leaves, not paying parents 25 euros a day and then expect it. So I will not go there because we will open a can of worm. So I would say we should go for the more ready sectors, like where it's more likely to be a success. ICT, include some public entities, because we need them for demonstration purposes.
Well, let's not forget that many of these companies, as we saw on the slide, Kirsten's slide, are already implementing flexibility as much as it pays the company and the employee. So
and I think it's good to continue in that trend, experimenting, seeing what works. Like, for example, the gaming companies today, it's a must that you offer flexibility, that you allow workers to work from home. Otherwise, nobody would join, So having these incentives could make the employer more attractive as well, see it that way.
Can I ask you to conclude and then we'll continue?
Just last thing, it's about the issue of challenging the assumption that productivity will automatically fall if the pay remains the same. I would say evidence is mixed, it depends. The 100 model relies on work redesign. You have to revolutionize the workplace. You have to look at the way you're organizing work. You have to invest in reskilling, investment in automation, so it's not simply doing less for the same pay. And we also, I also wanted to point out that competitiveness isn't only wage cost per hour. It's the total labor cost. So we also have, if our workers are burnt out, if there's a lot of anxiety, mental health, that comes with a very high cost as well. So let's keep that in mind as well.
And it increases the cost of employment, which has already been referred to by Lucian as well.
Exactly.
So I'll come to Adrian. As part of an international hotel brand, Adrian, how would implementing a 4-day week in Malta impact the operational cost of the tourism sector in Malta, in your opinion? Would that be felt on our price competitiveness and on quality services as a destination?
Well, to start off with, we as a hospitality industry, time is of essence, so we sell time. If I have an employee, the reception has to be covered, the restaurant has to be covered, the people outside looking after us today, they need to be there. They're waiting for us to go out, so they need to be there. So time is critical to us, and it needs to be covered. And this goes for hotels and it goes for restaurants especially. You don't want to walk into a restaurant and the waiter doesn't come and bring you the menu. We all get upset by that. And we are, I wouldn't say more than any other industry, but we are particularly working in a very international environment where we're competing on a daily basis with many other destinations with very different labor structures, right? So if a couple of years ago I was working in Dubai and in Tunisia, they have a 48-hour week where they work a 6-day week. More recently, I was working in the Czech Republic. They have a very different labor setup over there as well. So we have a model here, which is, as Joe highlighted earlier, 60% of our colleagues are not local. They're coming in to Malta to work. This is the purpose of their, yes, they want some work-life balance, but maybe less than I do as a local. Their families are abroad. They are already encountering a lot of challenges to get here, and we as employers are facing this on a daily basis. And that is stunting our competitiveness from being able to attract these people already. So from an employment point of view, from a competitive point of view, from attracting employment, that's already a challenge. From a cost and attracting tourism point of view and our impact on our businesses, we cannot sustain a 25% increase in our rates. You know, we are already competing in a very flexible and engaging market. So costs cannot be passed on, and therefore we'd have to absorb a significant amount of those costs. That would mean that we'd need to look further at productivity improvements, but that is an ongoing thing that I would say everybody in this room is already doing. Every business is constantly looking, can we improve productivity? Can we use AI? Can we use technology to enhance our services and reduce essentially our costs? Because we're having to do that anyway because labor is not available. So, you know, if 20 years ago we had a certain number of staff in our businesses. Today we have less simply because we have the vacancies, but we can't fill those vacancies. So that's a reality of our business. So how we would go about this, I think there is no product that will, or no policy that will fit all. I think we as employers have to be sensible and address each individual situation as it comes. And that's our...
Yeah, fair enough. I'll remain with you, Adrian. Do you think that 4-day week, you know, implemented either voluntarily or mandated, would improve employee retention in the tourism industry?
I think it'd be very difficult to improve that, particularly because, as I highlighted, 60% of our employees are coming here to work. So 40 hours for them, they want to work 50 hours if they can, because that's, you know, it's the rate of income that they have. Also, turnover in our industry is not necessarily, it's linked to rents, it's linked to the cost of living per se, not necessarily to the income or to the hours. If these people could work more, they would have enough disposable income, in some cases to send back home, in other cases to do other things. But it is lack of drawing people to Malta is because of the high cost of rent, the high cost of living. That is not an insignificant amount more than the countries that we're competing in. If I had to just take Greece as an example, so in Greece, most resorts close in the winter and operate in the summer. So employees are working for 8 months of the year. But they're working a 6.5, sometimes a 7-day week for those 8 months, but then they have 4 months off or 5 months off, whatever that is. That model works for them, and I'm not suggesting that's a model that works for us, but we are competing with those countries. And for individual people who are making decisions on how they want to live their lives, and I think today everybody wants a model that fits themselves, right? And we need to have flexible solutions for different people, almost like we have a plethora of options there, which I appreciate from this panel. It's very difficult, but would be nice.
Yeah. Incidentally, that's the model that works on in the cruise industry as well. So it is indeed very tight from a competitive point of view. I'll go to Josef Vella now, and we heard this morning that there is the risk or the possibility that the actual fifth day will not be utilized for work-life balance or family-friendly purposes, but the employee might actually work and increase one's income, especially we've heard now if the person is a third country national. So in your proposals, Josef, how would you legislate for this? How would you try to anticipate that the 4-day week is actually meeting the purpose of a better work-life balance?
Well, basically what we have to understand is that we have to be genuine, sincere, and I'm pretty sure if there is a reduced week, there will be people who will work extra hours or do part-time. This already happens today with the 40-hour week, so let us be sincere about it. I'm pretty sure there will be. But I think you see the labor market as much as I see it, and you know that at the moment we have 2 generations at least opposite to each other at the place of work. We have those of our era who used to work all the part-time, all the overtime, etc., etc. And then we have the upcoming generations who just give the 8 hours and they don't want to work overtime. Then we have some employers here. We're discussing how we can incentivize maybe even the rate of overtime from 1.5 to 2 to double, and yet this generation still say, no, that's my time, now I want my life, sort of, and I want to do whatever I want. So something like this generation will take it up. But definitely the generations of people who are still used to working all the possible overtime, those will still do it nonetheless. The issue of working beyond the 40 hours, the 35 or whatever, but is not a one of reform when it comes to work time. It's a one of financial aspect. That is, maybe these people are not comfortable enough with their full-time salary. And that is why, because otherwise, when people get to the stage that they are comfortable with the salary, or as they achieve the aims in their life, people stop doing overtime, stop doing the part-time work. So that is not a discussion for working time reforms. That is a discussion, is the pay within that particular place of work enough for the individual to make his ends, to make his ends meet. But if we're doing a policy, or whenever we do policies, we do them for the present and the future. And the present, employees coming in the labor market, already with you as employees. And those who are going to join in the coming years are people who want to give their fair share, the 8 hours, no more part-time work, no more over. At least that's what we are seeing.
Indeed. Kirsten will tell us that the older generation and the younger generation are not actually on the same backward bending curve, because the younger generation starts bending much less before. And I welcome Minister Byron Camilleri to the audience, and thank you very much for being with us this morning. Josef Buġeja, għax inkella tiġġieldu. What do you think is the role of us social partners going forward concretely now in this debate?
If we opt, and I believe we should, as a country, opt for a study, we should be part and sit on the table. We will be at the core of that discussion. because we know exactly what's happening at the place of work. We know what employees wish and their needs and their aspirations. And the Employers Association know exactly what their members and the government will discuss together. We can discuss together where we're going. This could be part of the Malta vision. So, and that's why we said this study. We don't want something, because if we introduce a 32-hour week, because people are suffering from anxiety, and then we start losing workplaces, that will create more. I cannot agree with the gentleman when he says, because third country nationals want to work more. That's why we have a 40-hour, because it doesn't make any sense for us. But I can see, because I used to work in a hotel, the operation side, it needed to be 24 hours. So yes, we have to cater for that. We have to cater what will be the costs of that operation increase, because I know that they're in competition. And I don't want any organization to lose work or to lose competitiveness. But we are also being faced with situations where people are not literally enjoying their life. We've seen the numbers. And apart from that, whoever, let's say 10 years ago, imagined that from your mobile you could now order a pizza. No one imagined it, but it's happening. So the world of work is changing. Like Kirsty said in the study, the productivity with technology increased, but salaries did not increase as much as that. Most today went to profits. And that's good. I'm not against that. But is it a time and a moment in time that we need to study this? The 40-hour week, Joe said, and I knew that, it was the first part. It was 8 hours work, 8 hours leisure, and 8 hours rest. Let's say 100 years ago, they said 7 hours work, 9 hours leisure. Would be here discussing it. It could be. It could be. But the world of work is changing fast, and we need to cater for everyone. Yeah. We cannot say this one fits to all. No, this model doesn't. We need to cater for the, as I said, I was thinking about the, not just the hospitality, the caring industry, the national security. Police, what's going to happen? But we also know that through artificial intelligence, there will be loss of workplaces and professional ones. There was a study of Professor Alex Nightingale. So we need to start addressing this, but we need to keep in focus not just the 40 hours, what we do. Since, and this has been since 77, I think, when I started, yeah. They say every employment contract said that I'm employing someone for a 40-hour week, doing, if it's a full-time job. So the measure is the 40-hour week, not the work. Why we not start measuring work? Why not? So, and that's why this study, if we are part of a global economy, and we are, we need to study the impact of this, like every other country is doing.
Thank you. Anna, back to you. In our study, and obviously in yours as well, we saw the experience of countries that managed to progress along the 40-hour week successfully, and others that were less perhaps successful. But in the element of success, what role do you think did skills development and upskilling play in managing to balance out the needs of the employer and the employee?
Yes, upskilling actually turned a 4-day week from working less to working smarter. You know, that's the whole idea, that you work smarter. But upskilling has to be accompanied by other things, and I'm going to mention some of them. First of all, work redesign and continuous improvement. So can we find lean processes towards higher skills, higher value tasks? How do we do that? Through waste removal, for example. Workplace simplification, reducing errors, handover frictions. You know, how do we do those better so that people can work less? The self and team management, prioritization, delegation, meeting disciplines. Do we have to do all those meetings? Do they make sense? The clearer ownership, the coordination. Then the digital skills and tool adaptation, the workflows, the automation, the asynchronous collaboration using things like Slack, for example, the smarter use of productivity tools. Another important factor is management upskilling. Usually whenever you want to make a change, you find a lot of resistance from those, in management positions. They will always say, this is how we work, this is fine. So unless you train the management, you will have a problem. So train them for outcomes-based performance, what has just been said by Josef, workload rebalancing. So this is, for some industries, there's a very long hour culture, the financial sector. Does that still make sense? Do we need to recalibrate perhaps and become a little bit realistic in the workloads that we're giving? Are they humane? Are they doable? Redesigning KPIs around value, around output rather than presence, because presence doesn't mean anything. I can spend a lot of time at the place of work and I'm not being productive. And usually the workers always find a way, if they don't want to be productive, to not be productive. Finally, and this is for operations like hospitals, like where you have a 24-hour service, you need multi-skilling. The workers need to be multi-skilled so that you have coverage planning, cross-training to maintain service levels. You need to handle peaks, reduce single point of failure, and so on. So it depends on so many things. And that's why I said you need a revolution, and you need to monitor, you need to know exactly what you're doing, not just upskilling, but work in tandem with this change that you have to bring about.
Thank you. And we welcome the leader of the opposition, Honorable Dr. Alex Borg, to the audience as well. Thank you very much for being with us. Ruben, if I may turn to you now. Do you see merit in an economy-wide standardized approach to the implementation of a 4-day week? Or do you prefer flexibility, as in voluntary or sector-specific schemes? In other words, do you think that implementing some form of 4-day week could put companies at a competitive disadvantage in any way?
From the comments I've been hearing, I think we have consensus that a one-size-fits-all doesn't apply. And I concur with my colleague that half of our workforce is TCNs. And we know that the majority of them, on their day off, they work part-time. So their primary focus is to get as much money as possible so they can sustain their families at home. So there's also another consideration. If we, hypothetically, we see the government implementing a 4-day week and the private sector opts out of it, we might potentially see another shift from the private sector to the government entities. So, from my perspective, is usually in this case it's the employees and the market that regulates itself when it comes to these kind of conditions. In my case specifically, I can see some tweaks in the administration part of our operations, which is a very small part in the great scheme of things. But when I see my entire operations, I don't see it work effectively without, again, there is the ambiguity about the costs, the salaries, the pay cuts. We have to see the consideration of the employee if he has financial commitments on that 5th day, is going to do a part-time work. So if we're discussing the employee well-being or family-friendly measures, I think addressing only the working hours is not enough. I think there needs to be a wider discussion on a national level on all the services that these families need to have. Like I'm a parent, my wife is a parent, and at 2 we need to leave work to pick up the child. But in my position, I just simply switch off my mobile and I'm not there at work. I need to be reachable. So there are all these considerations. So addressing only the working hours and the productivity hours, I don't think it's enough.
Yeah.
I think we have to look at a much wider perspective to have a healthier, for lack of a better word, and a more balanced life.
Yeah, I think in fact that is one of the key messages from today's conference. And also that we need to put the horse before the cart, because obviously if we need investments in technology, investments in reskilling, in BPR, you know, whatever, those have to come much before, as they did in the Netherlands, which we saw explained by Joe, before we start tweaking with the time, because otherwise we'll have an economic disaster. I don't know if you were actually ready. Sorry for interrupting.
No,
you.
I mean, when it comes to technology, we see where we can implement AI, digitalization in our processes. There are off-the-shelf solutions and machinery which target much bigger markets than Malta. So in order to have those kind of machines, implement those kind of machines to fulfill the automation, to address the growth and lowering the hourly output, we need, it will put our business in a position that we need to find bigger markets to address, to make sense of that capital expenditure.
Yeah.
So there are bits and pieces of technology that we can implement, but it won't be a full-blown implementation that will be like dark factories and no employees working.
Because our small market is also, and we didn't mention it this morning, part of the limiting factors that we're facing as well in the domestic oriented sectors. So Philip, from your experience, would a 4-day week serve as a meaningful differentiator in attracting and retaining skilled workers, or are other factors, in your opinion, like compensation, career development, and others, still more important for your employees?
I mean, I think it always depends on what we're comparing here. If we're saying there's legislation in place that requires this, then your competitiveness between industries, between employers, goes out the window right there. I think Seifert as a company, and we've been in Malta since 1991, we've been able to build up a really strong company culture, which we've seen over the last years acts as a big differentiator and as something that does allow us to be more competitive in the labor market. And this goes as far as being able to be flexible on working hours, on working arrangements in some cases. Despite the depth of processes that we have, I have 2 departments that are almost entirely staffed by working mothers, because the process allows the flexibility that they require, be that on volume of hours or on the time of those hours. And in a sense that sort of even bothers me a bit on a personal level, I really take great pride in being close to my people and being able to engage on these topics, that just sweeping across the board and taking away that advantage which we put a lot of effort, a lot of time into, and which today does serve as a competitive advantage, would go away. Now, looking at that internationally is a very different matter then, because in countries where this might not be the case, having to deal with those cost imbalances, having to deal with misalignment of working hours and expectations of availability when it comes to customers calling and expecting to have support and engagement, simply pushes up the cost beyond the struggles that we already have there. And, you know, close on that sentiment, I think when we're thinking about how can we improve our quality of life, the quality of life of our people, of our families, we definitely have bigger issues to tackle than the working hours during the week. I mean, what are we going to do during those extra 8 hours? Sit around and sit in traffic and worry about all the construction? We have bigger priorities, I think, than reducing working hours.
Thank you. And we'll close with Lucienne. Lucienne, you come from the professional services environment with a global mobility of talent. Do you think that if Malta had to mandate a 4-day week across the board, do you think that we would be more attractive as a place to work internationally, I mean, attracting international professional staff. Are there any hidden costs for the employer that we are overlooking today in this debate?
So I think although it would be an attractive concept for an employee, I think at the moment we're already competing with a number, and I can see this even in our network. So people that prefer other countries, when choosing where to work. And it's because there are so many factors, that impact whether an employee chooses Malta or somewhere else. I mean, the higher GDP per capita was mentioned. So when we are competing with other offices, with other countries, for employees, we're finding that a number of employees would, if they have the choice, they would go for those countries where either the salary is higher, GDP per capita, the standard of living, citizenship, another controversial subject, in this country. So I don't think that on its own will, unfortunately, will make it, from a competitiveness point of view.
Okay, thank you. With that, I thank you very much for your participation. I enjoyed asking the questions because usually I'm sitting there. But thank you very much for your attention, and I give the floor back to Edward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you to the panel once again for being with us today. You will find a small token of appreciation for being with us on your seats. And I would like to invite the leader of the opposition, Dr. Alex Borch, to give us his presentation. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Representatives of employers, unions, academia, and civil society, distinguished guests. Thank you for the invitation and for creating space for one of the most important economic discussions in Malta that should have at the moment of development of our country. Let me begin by acknowledging the work being done by the Malta employers. The position paper presented is serious, data-driven, and intellectually honest. It avoids slogans, resists easy answers, and respects the complexity of Malta's economy. That alone elevates this discussion. Although today's conference refers to the four-day week, I would suggest that the real value of this debate goes far beyond the number of days we work. The deeper question we are really asking is how do we build an economy that creates more value with less strain in a way that is sustainable for businesses, families, and the country as a whole. That is the question addressed by the Malta Employers paper. And it is the same question the opposition believes Malta must confront through data and evidence. Let me be clear. This is not an ideological debate. It is not about importing fashionable models, legislating lifestyle choices, or undermining competitiveness. Both the Malta employers and the opposition start from the same premise. Malta's challenge is not how many hours we work, but how much value we create through those hours. The data is clear. Malta works longer hours than the European average, yet productivity per hour remains weak and volatile. For years, growth has been driven largely by expanding the labor force rather than by increasing output per worker. That model delivered growth, but it also delivered congestion, pressure on infrastructure, higher costs, and social strain. Continuing down this path is not neutral. It is a decision with real consequences. And this is why doing nothing is not an option. Relying on labor quantity rather than quality, long hours instead of technology, and reactive skills policies instead of planning will make it increasingly difficult to retain talent, support families, sustain public services, and remain competitive. At the same time, the Malta Employers paper is right to warn against shortcuts. Productivity cannot be legislated, flexibility cannot be imposed, and one-size-fits-all solutions are economically dangerous. International experience teaches us a very important lesson. Countries that succeeded did so through negotiating change and high productivity. Countries that legislated reductions without foundations often struggled. The lesson is simple. You do not shorten working time to create productivity. You create productivity first, and flexibility follows. This is why the four-day week should not be treated as a fixed destination, but as a lens through which we examine how work is organized, how technology is used, how skills are deployed, and how time connects to output. When viewed this way, the conversation naturally shifts towards flexible working arrangements, grounded in productivity, not rigid models. Flexibility does not mean fewer hours everywhere. It means smarter allocation of time, recognition of sectoral differences, and options rather than templates. This brings me to an essential point. There can never be a universal model. Productivity behaves differently across sectors. In healthcare, manufacturing, logistics, and hospitality, output is closely tied to hours. In knowledge-based industries, gains can be achieved through better systems, fewer interruptions, and smarter processes. Any serious policy must respect this reality. That is why studies and pilots are essential, not to force adoption, but to understand feasibility, measure outcomes, and avoid unintended consequences. At the center of all this discussion lies technology. Digitalization and AI change the relationship between time and output. They automate repetitive tasks, improve scheduling, and allow workers to focus on higher value work. But technology must come before flexibility, not after. Without digitalization, reduced hours reduce output. Compressed weeks increase stress, and flexibility becomes cosmetic rather than productive. This is why investment in technology must be treated as an economic necessity and a national priority. Added value work, however, also requires added value skills. Malta faces a structural skills challenge. Demand is evolving faster than supply. Many workers are underutilized, and future-oriented skills are not being produced at sufficient scale. This is one of the main reasons productivity remains weak, despite long working hours. Higher productivity does not emerge by chance. It is built through skills, technology, and continuous adaptation. That is why we need a data-driven approach. National skills mapping, identification of underused skills, and continuous labor market intelligence that tracks demand and emerging roles. 5-year policy cycles are simply too slow for a modern economy. Reskilling must be seen not as correcting deficiencies, but as unlocking potential. Many workers are not low productivity individuals. They are operating in low productivity systems. Reskilling allows movement up to the value chain, but better use of technology and higher output without longer hours. Productivity reform is therefore a shared responsibility. Government must invest in a digital public services, modern education and training, and alignment between skills and labour market demand. At the same time, employers must be supported to invest in automation, redesign processes, and shift management culture from hours-based supervision to output-based performance. Competitiveness today depends as much on how work is organized and as long as how long it is performed. The Malta Employers paper rightly highlights burnout, absenteeism, and retention as real economic costs. Replacing workers is expensive. Disengagement undermines output, and instability reduces quality. Flexibility, when grounded in productivity, becomes a competitive tool, not a social extra. Finally, while labour reform alone will not solve Malta's demographic challenges, work organisation does matter. Long hours and rigid schedules place real strain on families, particularly at critical life stages. A flexible, evidence-based framework can reduce pressure without undermining output, far more effectively than blanket reductions. Let me conclude. This discussion is not about working less. It is about working better. Not ideology, but data. Not shortcuts, but foundations. Not imported models, but Malta-specific plans. The responsible path forward is clear. No blanket policies, no rushed legislation, and no decisions without actual evidence. Instead, we must study, pilot where appropriate, invest in skills and technology, and build a flexible, productivity-driven labour framework that fits Malta's reality. This is not a retreat from ambition. It is a more mature ambition, one that prepares Malta for the future of work, rather than reacting towards it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Boj. And now I would like to invite the Honourable Minister, Dr. Byron Camilleri, Minister for Home Affairs, Security and Employment, to give us his remarks.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Today's conference focused on the 4-day week and broader changes in the world of work. We have heard a range of views. I was lucky to be here for some time as well, experiences and proposals. This has been a useful discussion and one that reflects the complexity of the subject. We would like to commend the Malta Employers Association for organizing this conference and also the work that went into it. I also wish to acknowledge the position paper that was presented. It provides a structured overview of different models adopted abroad and examines how they relate to our context, the Maltese context. And this offers a sound basis, I would say, for an informed discussion. I also thank the panelists and speakers for their contributions, as well as those who engage in this debate in a constructive and respectful manner. The issues discussed today go beyond any one single issue. Questions of working time, flexibility, and quality of life must be considered within the wider context of our labor market, our economy, and our long-term objectives as a country. These are matters that require a careful assessment, balance, and responsibility. As a government, we are clear about Thank you. As I was saying, as a government, we are clear about our duty. Our responsibility is twofold. On one hand, we must continue, as we have been doing, to improve the quality of life and work-life balance. But on the other hand, we must protect productivity, competitiveness, and the long-term sustainability of our economy. One cannot exist without the other. Work is not only about the number of hours worked, it is also about self-expression. And this is why, in recent years, as a government, we have taken concrete steps to modernize working practices, particularly within the public service. We introduced more flexibility while maintaining good and high standards of service. But we did not rush. We planned, we tested, we acted based on evidence. And one of the main lessons from today's conference is very clear. There is no single model that can work for everyone. What works in one sector, in one organization, or in one country may not work in another. A four-day week can bring benefits in certain situations, but it also raises questions about staffing, questions about continuity of service, questions about labor supply, and the economic impact. These questions are especially important in a country like ours, like Malta, which is operating under conditions of full employment and in a context of a population aging, where the supply of local workers will increasingly decline. And this is why we must be clear about our objectives. As a responsible government, we'll always work to improve the well-being of the people in our society. But we will not take decisions that weaken competitiveness or public finances at risk. If our economy is damaged, it is ultimately our workers, our families, who will pay the price. And to understand where we are today, we must remember where we came from. Before 2013, Malta faced high unemployment and widespread precarious work. Finding a job was difficult. Many workers had little security and little dignity, I must say. In fact, at the time, the government decided that workers had to forego any public holidays that happened to be on a weekend. In the private sector, most women could only get a part-time job, as childcare was in short supply and expensive. While low economic growth meant that a number of employees reduced working time and also pay. This government changed that direction. In a relatively short time, we're strengthening the economy and the labor market. We did so with strong social values and with the worker in the center of our policies, not only as an economic contributor, but as a person. Today, Malta has the lowest unemployment rate in history, and one of the lowest in the European Union. Participation rates for both women and men are at record levels. Inactivity rates are among the lowest we have ever seen. Young people today have far more opportunities, better wages, and better working conditions than in the past. But success also brings challenges. Today, Malta has more than 9,700 vacancies, with only around 1,100 people unemployed. That means more than 9 vacancies for every unemployed individual. We are in a situation of full employment. And aging means that now, and for the foreseeable future, every year, thousands more Maltese workers leave the workforce than actually join it. This is why dependence on foreign labor is high, and a policy that is not carefully designed risks increasing that dependence. At the same time, we are clear about one fundamental principle. The economy is for the people, not the people for the economy. As societies progress, it is right to place greater emphasis on quality of life and time spent with family. The movement I am part has always had this at the core of its values, but always in a pragmatic way. This is why we have constantly focused on flexibility, not imposition, flexibility, giving people options, allowing individuals to choose what works best for their own circumstances. And this approach is reflected in the measures that we have introduced. We introduced free childcare, so those parents who wanted to continue work could do so. We restored public holidays leaves that falls on weekends without reducing income. We extended paternity leave from 2 days to 10 days, so families can spend important time together after the birth of their child. We introduced carers leave, recognizing the realities faced by many families. And we also introduced, through legislation, the right to request flexible working arrangements for workers with young children, including remote working, reduced hours, and flexible schedules, while protecting workers from discrimination. And this year, we'll continue to work through a consultation to further strengthen maternity and paternity leave. As always, this will be done through dialogue with social partners. Because this government listens, and because reform must be sustainable. As the largest employer in Malta, the government must also lead by example. We must maintain high standards of efficiency and service delivery. But we must also support those who dedicate their lives to public service. And this is why, since 2023, we introduced modern work practices within the public service. And these include flexi-time, remote working for at least 20% of the working hours, extended remote working in specific cases, and reduced working hours where appropriate. We also introduced Flexi-Week, an important reform not too distant from what we are discussing today about the 4-day week. It allows public officers where service delivery is not affected to choose a 4-day week. And it also allows them, if they prefer, to spread their hours over 6 days. It does not impose, it offers a choice. So when I hear others saying that they will launch pilot projects on a shorter working week in the public sector, I tell them there is no need for such pilot projects. The schemes are already there and have been there for years. And this is the approach we believe in. Options, not one-size-fits-all solutions. Flexibility, not rigid models. As we have seen today, what may sound attractive in theory does not always work in practice. This is why we'll continue to move forward carefully, responsibly, but also with confidence. We'll promote work-life balance, we'll protect service quality, we'll safeguard competitiveness, and we'll continue to build an economy that works for workers, employers, and society as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Camilleri. And this is the point where we open the discussion to the floor. So if there is anyone who would like to add any remarks, and I'm seeing hands being raised already. So we can start with the first remark.
Good afternoon, Joe Fitzpatrick, Beauty Culture Group, but I'm going to talk about my hotel experience of 32 years. We have been through this already. When you come to this problem, we have to diversify the solution. The problem is it pay or is it hours? When it comes to pay, I don't know who from the employees will accept reduced pay like we had done ourselves in our business to save the hotel. If you have to make a survey, maybe not even 5% will accept. So this is out of the window. So we're talking about reduced 4-day week, of course, at the same pay. Now, in my experience, I have gone through this 32-hour week. When the hotel business was going very, very down, we had occupancy of 35%. So we sat down with the Jamaicans Union, who were very cooperative, and we said, no, we can't work 4 days a week because you have to replace staff. As Adrian said, you know, we have 2 days out of 7 we have to replace staff. Now we have to have 3 days. So you cannot work the operation, as also Ruben said, by just reducing 1 day a week, because the guests have to be fed, service have to be cleaned, and you cannot just say to the guests, now tomorrow you don't come to eat because we have less staff. So what we had at that time worked out for 2 years, 10 months, but we saved the business and we saved the staff when then they could enjoy the benefits of a growing industry. So we reduced the pay at that time by 20% of all the staff, but for department heads, we were working more hours because we had more problems on Saturday as well. So the idea now turns to the working week. As Joseph said, it should not be discussed to kick off as a 4-day week in those industries where they work, as also Ruben said, 7 days a week, because it will cost you 20% more. You have to get more staff for the other day, plus more staff for the vacation leave of those staff you're going to employ. This is a rippling effect. So you have about 25% more in salaries. So we cannot ignore the fact that the industry will suffer, especially in the case of those who are working like security, hospitality, or health on a 7-day basis. And then the problem is also triple, because apart from the pay, we have a big shortage of labor. So we create another vacuum. We say we don't want to employ more expatriates, which I think, as explained, we need to work. And we have a problem of cost to the company, but also a problem of finding staff. Everybody is complaining. We have also a problem even to fix a hinge in one of the villas we hire, because they have no staff, Joe. I can't find staff to work. So everybody expresses this problem. So we create a problem financially and also the labor market. So I think to kick off, we should not concentrate, as Joseph said, on a 32-4-day week, but it would be at least a 32-hour, 5-day week, because coming to our business now in the wholesale business, we employ more staff to cope with the volume. So if I have to reduce their days of week again, I have to employ more staff for the days that these people are not going to work. So there's an additional cost. So if they have to struggle like they did in our case for nearly 3 years, then they can maybe bear the burden of the additional work, because they're going to enjoy a better life, which we have been trying to boost, you know. But we are boosting also the payroll and also the problem of not finding the right staff. So as a platform, it should not be a 4-day week, but a reduced hour week, but study, as everybody is saying, the consequences, because this will be a blow to the industry from a financial point of view. Thank you.
More remarks?
Thank you very much. Allow me to thank the Malta employers for taking the initiative to create this discussion. And in the beginning of the presentation, Joe mentioned the characteristic change in the Maltese labor market. And you can see that even through the trends that we have saw presented by The Economist. Trends show that things are changing. So it's inevitable. The future has to change. And we have to be prepared for that change. We cannot continue to work around the problem, say nothing about it, come here and discuss everything except the issue at hand, and keep on continuing to be reactive. We have to be a proactive government, a proactive country to address the issues which are on our doorstep. Issues which relate to low childbirth rate, digitalization, artificial intelligence, aging population, the new Vision 2050 and how this will affect. I appreciate listening to the different industries and realizing, which is clear as day, that this is not a one-size-fits-all. And we not only need to dissect it sectorially, but I would even say an enterprise by enterprise. As we saw, manufacturing, two situations in manufacturing are completely different. So being proactive, preparing, studying, doing pilot projects, yes, is preparing us for a future which is inevitable. Doing nothing, going and walking around the problem and avoiding it will only create a situation where we have to be reactive, and that will create even more problems. I thank once again the Malta employers for building a pediment for this discussion. Hopefully it will move on, grow more, and we will have the data-driven issues that we need, the data-driven information that we need to take the right choices. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Further remarks? Anyone else? Before we move to the final address? Mr. Farrugia.
If I may, I would also like to caution against developments in Malta that will create a two-tier labor market. We already know that, for example, not all jobs are teleworkable. Not all jobs or not all sectors may afford to introduce shorter working hours, whereas others, not so much. For example, this was evident even in the survey results. And the problem that this can bring about is that the labor obviously will move towards those areas where they can have more advantageous conditions. There is already the competition between the private sector and the public sector in this respect. And what can happen is that an ever-increasing dependency on foreign labor to work into those areas where such flexibility might not be possible. And the result would be that we'd have two classes of employees in this country. Okay, one who can benefit from the measures that were discussed here, and others who, because of the nature of their job, cannot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else who would like to contribute to the discussion this morning?
Thank you. I think the point I want to stress is that the 4-day week is one out of many options. In those organizations where, you know, if it's a factory setting or if it's a shop, we can look at small changes that can still make a very big difference to employees. So I think while we should definitely continue discussing this issue, let us also open up a wider discussion on how can we innovate, how can we bring the workplace to the realities of the 21st century workers. The migrant workers face particular problems, so we need to address those. You know, like if you have parents we have to address those if you have younger people, you know. So I think let's keep the discussion wide, because there are so many different options, work-life options, that we need to look into, that we shouldn't stop the discussion here. This is one out of many.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to, Senor?
Having heard what many people have been saying, and as Professor Borg said, that there is lots of convergence, I think we mustn't forget as well that in an employee-dominated market, the market always regulates itself. We've had to increase salaries where salaries need to be increased. We've had to give reduced hours where reduced hours were needed. So, as Professor Borg just said now as well, each sector has its own needs. So those needs will be factored on their own. And with wages going further up, they don't need to reach 20%, because as it was highlighted correctly, it's a 20% increase. But if we feel as employers that we need to get good employees and we need to offer them a 4-day week, then that will happen alone, whether we like it or not.
Thank you. We still have a few minutes, if there is anyone who would like to. All right, so we'll move on to the final speech by the President of Malta Employers, Mr. Ivan Refalo, who I would like to invite on stage to join. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we had a very healthy discussion today, hearing different views, and that is what makes it healthy. It's not the pro or con, but we need to have a healthy discussion. What we need to keep in mind is that we cannot generalize. There are different industries, and what applies to one industry will not apply for another industry. So we need to be, I think in the case of Malta, we need more data to substantiate what we're saying. Obviously this will take time, but then another thing, finally, the market, I mean one of the comments that was raised, I mean one of the last ones, ultimately the market will regulate itself. And that would depend very much on supply and demand. We know that the situation we are currently facing is shortage of labor. It is something that needs and is being addressed, but we know the risks of it and what it can lead to. We need to stress more pushing up the productivity. That is, doing more with less. And if we manage, we're still lagging behind in the EU on the productivity level. And I believe that if we manage to push that up, then we can discuss much more. We also recognize the fact that certain industries can offer much more flexibility than others. We know, for example, what can go in the gaming, in certain financial sectors. The flexibility that can be afforded there cannot be afforded in, let's say, manufacturing, or in those industries where the face-to-face requirement of the employee is necessary. So we need to strike the balance, and the balance is always what would ultimately lead to a smooth running. We need to be very, very careful to avoid generalizations, and be careful also about potentially giving false expectations, because false expectations can lead to literally disrupt the market. I will close here just with a small appeal, and this appeal goes really to our political leaders, which is to be careful at least, and that is where we always ask for discussion, from offering certain flexibilities that could not be emulated in the industrial environment, because that is what can create unhealthy competition between the private sector and the public sector. Ultimately, we recognize that the public sector is required, and to have a healthy public sector is a necessity. But ultimately, this is financed by all taxpayers coming from private and public sector. And we have to be careful not to go beyond what is feasible. And I close here. I thank you once again, all of you, and especially the panelists who gave us the different views from the different aspects. And I hope you'll find this fruitful, and we'll come up later on with following this up later on. Okay, thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Refalo, for your closing remarks. Thank you, everyone, for attending this conference this morning. I would like to extend the Malta employers' thanks to Minister Camilleri, the Leader of the Opposition, the members of the panel, as well as the speakers. If you would like to continue the discussion, you can do so by sending your remarks to admin@maltaemployers.com. admin@maltaemployers.com. So that you can reach out and make your voice heard in that way as well. Now, you would like to join us for a networking lunch offered by Malta Employers. So thank you very much for being with us. Again, thank you.